So I'm really excited to have on the podcast as my next guest, Laura Gemmell, who is doing things around educating people with AI. And AI is such a hot topic at the moment. It's something that we're really passionate about here at Geiston. We're working loads with it. And Laura has a really interesting take on it because she is actually helping people understand it and sort of spreading it to the masses and making it more penetrable and accessible to everyone else. And I think that human element of AI and like how we bring everyone else into the conversation and include them in the journey is really, really important at the moment. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So hi Laura, thanks for joining us today. You're here to tell us a little bit about the world of taught by humans and a bit about AI and kind of how that's evolving. Which I'm sure our listeners are really, really interested in and eager to hear about. Do you want to start off by just telling us a little bit about kind of your story and how Taught by Humans kind of started being?
Yeah, so I actually learned to code through a company called Code First Girls based out of London. So they help women learn how to code. And I became an instructor through them. And through that, I was doing an awful lot of teaching kids coding at different events, so mostly volunteering. And every event I went to, I kept thinking, oh, I don't know if this is the curriculum I would choose to teach children. I don't know if this is how I would do it. And also I realized that a lot of the events were really expensive, like £140 a day per child in central London, which meant that actually that was cutting off a lot of children from learning these skills. So I actually set up Taught by Humans to be teaching kids coding. So I was running code camps in Tottenham and London. I was running through corporate social responsibility through companies like KPMG and WorldPay. I was running Get Interested in Tech work experience weeks for teenage girls, and that was what I was doing, and that probably lasted about 3 years. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I love teaching kids coding, and then COVID kind of hit. Mm-hmm. And alongside this, some of the parents of the kids had asked if I could do some spreadsheets and data courses for them, so I had been doing that. And during COVID, that was just what I leaned into, teaching data skills, focusing on women first of all. So we ran like we called it 100 Women Data Confident, so helping 100 women become data confident, so learn the skills they need to use data in their jobs or get a new job. And then I took a little bit of a break because I also did a PhD alongside this and was working full time, so I took a step back for a little bit because I was tired. So I was working as a data scientist for quite a while now, and I think the word would be scale up now. And it wasn't really working for me, so I quit after I'd been working there for a year, planning on taking a break. But this was around about the time that ChatGPT had just taken off, so everybody was coming to me to talk about AI. And I was like, oh, I can run courses in this again. That's actually what I enjoy doing. So I was running the courses, and I've had an idea about building a personalized education platform for adults for quite a while now. So as I wasn't doing anything else, I was like, oh, I'll give this a go. And that's kind of where we've got to with Taught by Humans now.
I love the way you say, as I wasn't doing anything else. You seem like the sort of person who has to be doing at least 4 things at once. And you've actually just given a wonderful segue. So I'll give a little teaser into our next podcast, which is with John Bradford from DigiLocal, which is all about teaching kids to code in the local area too. So thanks for that little nudge and a little teaser for our listeners. So your PhD was, I would say, sort of ahead of its time, slightly prescient. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because it's probably a lot more relevant right now than you thought it might have been at the time.
Yeah, so I started my PhD 5 or 6 years ago now. And originally I was looking at some gamification for designing particles for treating cancer, which is a bit of a random topic, but I was getting quite lonely, I would say, sitting by myself at a computer all day doing things that if I'd been working, I would have been working alongside a team of people to talk about. So it wasn't really working for me. So I was trying to work out what I was going to change my topic to. And my supervisor suggested, why didn't I do something about teaching kids robotics? Because that was what I was doing outside of work. And I started on that, and I was looking into that quite a lot and getting really excited about it. But I saw this massive gap in just teaching the public about AI. So AI is probably my interest subject because it's where like tech and data kind of meet to me. And this seemed really interesting to me. It was a big gap in anything that had been done before. There was lots of thought pieces on how we needed to start doing this and how the public should be learning about artificial intelligence. But then it kind of just stopped and no one actually went on and did it. And I was like, oh, I quite like teaching people. And I was doing a lot of education through like council-run education companies at the time. So I quite like teaching people who maybe aren't in mainstream education or doing like IT skills courses and math courses and stuff like that. So I sat in a park in London with a clipboard at an event and asked people if they would stop and talk to me about AI. And everyone I stopped and talked had loads of opinions on it, but it was very different than it was now. So they were talking about Roombas and facial recognition. There was no chat GPT. No one was using it every day. It was seen as this like almost like scary thing hanging over people's heads that maybe was going to do something. But everyone had a lot of opinions on it, and everybody wanted to learn something about it. So they either wanted to learn how to actually use it, how it was going to impact their jobs, or just to understand it a bit better, because yes, they saw news stories as being a bit scaremongering. So then I worked with Noel West Media Centre and a few other centres around Bristol to come up with this idea that we were going to invite members of the public in, and I designed all these sessions to help people co-design education for them, because one of the findings I had from my research was experts keep telling people what they need to learn, and it misses the mark quite a lot, because actually like what an expert needs to learn about AI and what the public need to learn, that's not the same thing. It doesn't even need to be in the same language. There needs to be common words, but like they don't need to learn how to code to talk about AI. And there seemed to be this weird blocker that experts were like, well, people can't do math, people can't code, and I was like, that's not what I'm going to teach them. Like if they want to learn that, I'm fine to teach them, but just learning how to talk.
I think that's quite a broad problem generally, isn't it? Everyone's kind of got their own agenda, and people are coming at it from their own perspectives, and they've got kind of their own backstory and experience that kind of leads them to think what's important, and it's actually just often really radically different. And something we find, because we recruit a lot of people from university, is that we find that a lot of the stuff that's taught in university is stuff that the lecturers were really interested in, which was really relevant, like 5-10 years ago. And so their ability to kind of keep up in formal curriculum education is actually quite limited because of that.
It's actually really interesting because COVID happened, I ended up not being able to do the co-design because unfortunately we couldn't do anything in person. It was scheduled for May 2020, which was peak lockdown. So I had to pivot and work out what I was going to do the final bit of my research on while locked down. And I ended up actually doing it on what skills are needed to work in data and AI. So on Teams calls, obviously, because that's what everyone was doing, spoke to about 75 companies and 75 individuals, got them to fill in some forms and spoke to them about what skills they needed. And that was actually a big finding, was people are coming out of university thinking that they have the skills relevant for the workplace, and they don't. And people think you need to go to university to learn these skills, but actually there's a lot of stuff online, but companies were a bit all over the place about whether they trusted online certification. So the finding from that was actually it's really hard to get into these careers if you didn't follow like a linear pathway and get yourself onto a graduate scheme, which is causing a big problem around the data skills gap. So there's not enough people with data skills, but companies aren't really willing to be flexible to help out there. So that was what I ended up concluding, and actually has nicely led me into Taught by Humans, which is trying to close this skills gap. Yeah,
it's a really challenging problem there, because sort of looking at it from the other side of the perspective as an employer, coming from recruiting people from university is quite easy because it's structured and you know what you're getting and it's very predictable, but it's not necessarily the best outcomes. And trying to look for people who have kind of taken their own path, often they get better outcomes, but it's really hard to judge because you've got no scale to judge it again. So you kind of have problems on both sides, I guess. Yeah, so AI has moved on quite a lot since you were doing those sort of studies. Obviously, ChatGPT just like radically changed the whole scene pretty much overnight, well, over about a 3-month period. And so now you've kind of pivoted even more towards the Taught by Humans idea of using generative AI as a teaching tool. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and how you've come to build a product? Because you're very much kind of on the front foot with this, like all these tools of with generative AI just emerging. There's lots of people out there, I'm sure, people listening to this podcast who are interested in kind of how you start, how you do that, how you start building something with generative AI.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the platform we've built is a personalization platform. So we have all this content we've created online, so YouTube videos, blogs, hands-on pieces, longer form bits of content, all around data and AI. So it's on one topic. And what I wanted to do was work out a way that we could get this to the person in a way that they needed it, and also that they could ask questions back if they were stuck. So one of the examples I always give is I was teaching a beginner's spreadsheet course once, and I was so sure I'd hit it at the right level for everyone in the room, and everyone was kind of looking at me blankly at one point, and I was like, well, what's wrong? And they were like, oh, we don't know what percentages are. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I just assumed everyone knew what percentages were. And all they needed was like a little 2 seconds of me explaining, and we were like friendly in-person education, so it's quite nice to do that. But actually people just get annoyed and give up when they get lost. So if someone had been reading through something that kept talking about percentages, they either have to go off and find it somewhere else, or like just give up, or just get over it.
Switch off.
Yeah. So to avoid doing that, we wanted to have some sort of personalization. So we're calling it our minimum viable product. So using OpenAI APIs. So OpenAI are the company that created ChatGPT, but they also have a way that you can kind of build your own version of ChatGPT from a more techie point of view. So if you pay for ChatGPT, you can obviously use its GPTs. I don't know why all their names are so similar. It's really hard to keep track of, where you can build like a custom version of ChatGPT. But you can actually take it one step further, and you can actually build your own chatbot using the same technology that powers ChatGPT. So I think ChatGPT's mission is to be a friendly, helpful assistant on any topic. You can take that away. So we've got one called Dotly that I built, that is its mission is to be your like learning companion and to help you learn the best things you can about data and AI in a way that works for you.
Why did you call it Dotly?
Because our platform's called Dotted, which is like I can actually explain this. So one of the things is it's about connecting the dots from where you are to where you wanted to be. So my like visualization of this is like loads of dots in space, and you're here with all the knowledge you have, but this is where you want to be. And there's loads of different dots in the middle that can be connected and can help you. So you end up with this like zigzag weird pattern, and two people getting from the same dot to the same last dot. It wouldn't be the same journey. So that I called it dotted because all the pictures I made of it when I was planning out in my head had dots in it, and it now stands for Dynamic Online Tailored Education. So I made it an acronym.
You made a acronym.
Exactly. But yeah, we call it dotted, and then we called the chatbot version Dotly. I don't know why. I just thought it seemed friendly. But yeah, so Dotly, actually, I originally built this in about 5 days, and I think you saw version 1
I saw the version 1 at the Bristol Tech Festival at the Expo.
Yeah, when I was like, okay, cool, I've said I'm going to demo something in 5 days, let me just build it. So I had to go building it, and I was really worried that I was going to have to just have like a weird sign-up sheet instead of a demo. So I built it really fast, and it worked end to end. It was extremely buggy and quite slow, if you remember, like in between every time you spoke to the chatbot.
You did quite well at covering it up, you know, the typical demo skill of like, I'm just going to click this, and while that's doing that, I'm just going to have a chat.
And it didn't even output anything nice at the end. It literally just output, it looked like code at the end, and I was like, look, you can see the lesson IDs here. Yay. But it worked. So I took it away, and I thought about what was taking so long. So like I was feeding text files into it, and if you know about how these generative AI models work, there's something in the background called a vector database. So how that works is, for a string of text, it's given a score. So the score from OpenAI is 1,536 numbers from -1 to 1. And it's a similarity score, so I don't know what they're ranking it against. I assume like a set of words, and it's really effective in being able to tell if 2 bits of text have similar meaning in them or similar words in them. We've actually now put all our content on a vector database, and it has a vector score, and it actually returns the top 10 most relevant bits of content based on writing a search string. So we did all of this, and it also got the cost down from $1.30, there we go, to 4 cents per run, which was really good because we weren't feeding in as much information, and we tweaked it around, and it was running from end to end, and it output something pretty at the end. It still wasn't quite right, like it was still a bit glitchy, and if anything went wrong, it was hard to debug. So what I actually ended up doing was something that I'm calling a multi-bot architecture. And academics would kill me because multi-bot systems are an actual thing that have existed for a really long time, and it has a meaning, but I'm calling it my multi-bot system. So I actually have 5 bots, or 5 generative AI algorithms that all kind of talk to each other. So the original one is whenever the content's uploaded, it writes a summary of the content, which is then fed in to write a vector score and also given to the other chatbots later on. So I feed in, here's the text or here's the transcript of our content. It gets a vector score based on the summary that an algorithm writes. And then we have Dotly, who is the front end. Yeah, they all have jobs. I've gotten really attached to them. So Dotly is the front end one that gets to know you. So asks you 5 questions. If you're into like learning science, it's like the learner needs assessment part of our platform. So what you want to know, your background knowledge, why you want to know it, do you have any preferred learning styles or anything else we need to know about you. Then another bot takes this information, turns it into a search string and looks up the vector database and returns.
What's that bot called?
It actually doesn't have a name. It's just that one doesn't have, all the rest of them have names. I don't know why that one just has a very simple job, so it just doesn't have a name. It's just, oh yeah, I know. I feel
sounds
bad.
Like your next job, you got to fix that.
I feel bad. And then the next one is our learning designer bot. So it's the one that actually writes the learning journey for the individual. So it gets all the stuff Dotly learned about you plus the relevant content. And then it writes a learning journey for you, and then you can go through the learning journey, and then if you want, at the end, we now have an assessment bot that can write an assessment for you based on why you're learning this and what way you like to learn. Currently, it only writes multiple choice questions, but that will also be updated as we add the personalization. And we're working on adding Dotly throughout the platform, so that you can talk to Dotly the whole way through. Kind of like Clippy from Microsoft Word, so they're just in the corner. If you want to ask a question or you're not following or it's too slow or too fast or you don't like the format, you can tell it and then it'll swap some content out for you.
Does Dotly have a face yet? I feel like there's an AI-generated face and talking voice that Dotly is going to come up with at some point.
So my friends that have tested it, it says Dotly talks like me, and I can't work out if this is factual or if they just think it talks like me.
Maybe it's your face then.
I think it says awesome at the start of a lot of sentences, and I do say awesome at the start of, like, when I'm being awkward, I'm like, oh, awesome. I think it talks like that. I have it in my head that it might be, you know the way you could change Clippy? I have an octopus that sits on my desk as like a little, like, I don't know, it was a present from someone. So in my head, octopuses are really smart. So it could be a little purple octopus or a robot or something. Yeah, I think that, Dotly, I can see an octopus making sense. I'm going to go home and do this now.
Great, seeing Dotly in a visual form. It's fascinating. We're talking about the vector database and embeddings is the OpenAI kind of technology that we use on that. I personally find it really fascinating because it's very effective. Sort of analysis of the meaning, but totally impermeable to humans. You get this kind of vector score and you have no idea what it means, but when you use it, it generates some fantastic output.
It's like, like how would we be able to understand 1,500 numbers in a row and be like, that means this. It's very effective. It's very useful. You can use it like a search string. So I think the example they give is looking up Wikipedia articles based on what you want. Which is really effective, which is how we've kind of used it. And I think you could apply that to pretty much any document searching. So big companies are using it a lot for that.
Yeah, it's not just documents. I mean, we're using it for searching sort of blobs of text that are in a database. So there's several kind of use cases for it. And it doesn't even need to be text. It can be, you can associate it, you just generate the text from images or something else. You know, it could be anything. So really fascinating field. I feel like we could talk about it forever, but I'm not going to let us talk about it forever. One sort of unrelated question I've got for you is, like, you know, I've come across you a few times on the Bristol tech scene at various networking events. Something I think our listeners are probably quite interested in, always getting hints and tips on, is kind of where to go to meet people who might be interesting and to have some interesting conversations. I was wondering if you just wanted to share some of your favourite kind of local meetups and places to go.
Yeah, so my favourite Bristol meetup is actually called ML Ops, which is Machine Learning Operations. It's quite techy, but I have gone with people who work in product, who work for a tech company, who aren't technical, and I find it really fascinating. They get speakers from all over the world. Actually, last time I went, I think it was someone from Romania was down talking, and it's more thinking about how we can use machine learning algorithms in businesses and how businesses are actually using them as part of their operations, and the talks are always really interesting. One time it was about playing, do you know the game Dobble? On like training a machine learning algorithm to play Dobble and then getting some kids to play it against it to see if it actually worked, and they'd done all this on a Raspberry Pi, which is this really tiny computer about that size. Some of the talks are really interesting. They're technical but not that technical, so they're quite good to follow along, and it's a really nice community. I've always found everyone really helpful whenever I go along to it. I also quite like, I think it's called Smart Cookies, and it's run by Unfold. I think they only do it once a quarter, and it's more for entrepreneurs probably, or business people. The last one was about navigating scale at businesses, which I found really helpful because I've actually just brought on some interns, so it was really helpful for me to think about my tiny bit of scaling and what that would mean in the future. But there's so many meetups to go to. I'm also, I should probably mention, on the steering committee for AI West, which is probably should throw that in there, which is a new group that's just been set up, similar to FinTech West. So that's more focused on business people and people trying to use AI both in business and academia, and trying to foster the relationship between academia in Bristol and the business community in Bristol, which is really interesting.
Because you talked to their launch a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I did. I did my multi-bot talk and showed some diagrams. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many meetups to go to. I think if you wanted to, you could probably go to something every day in Bristol.
Yeah, it's almost too much to choose from. Like, which is why it's always good to get recommendations, I think. Yeah. Interesting your comment on Dobble. Just the night before last, I went to a talk on Dobble. Well, it wasn't a talk on Dobble, but Dobble came up. And did you know, random fact, there's 55 Dobble cards, and everyone's always like, wow, it's amazing that you can always have one the same and only one the same on two different cards. And the guy went through kind of the algorithm that kind of proves it. And there's two missing. Did you know that?
No.
So there's actually 57 possible combinations, and there's 55 cards in the Dobble deck. So yeah, if you want, you can expand your Dobble deck by working out what those two missing cards are. So just to wrap up with the final question, I thought I'd throw out a big one for the last question that I'm going to ask you. So the AI is evolving pretty rapidly. What do you think is the role of the human in this kind of ever-changing world of AI? Because it's really surprised me the last couple of years how AI has evolved like so totally differently to the way that we thought. Like if you scroll back sort of 3 or 4 years, even not that far, I think most people thought like creativity would be like the last bastion of humanity and like the most important thing that humans would be there for. But actually, it turns out like ChatGPT is amazing at creativity, and it's one of the first things to kind of really go. So, kind of where do you think the role of the human is kind of really preserving in this new system?
That's really interesting. So I'd actually say the opposite. I would actually argue that ChatGPT is kind of showcasing how important human creativity is. So yeah, not to disagree with you.
Always good to have some challenge.
And actually, that's something I teach quite a lot. It's speeding up the boring parts of being creative. So draft number 1 is usually quite hard to do. Getting ChatGPT to write a blog that you then edit. Image creation when you might have just used stock images, stuff like that, process driven. But it's like, I don't think the pictures are sometimes really weird and they're not quite right. Sometimes people have like 7 arms still on DALL-E, which is like ChatGPT's, the equivalent of ChatGPT for images. And I don't think like if you ask ChatGPT to write you a story, it's quite weird and dry, and it's almost like if there was an uncanny valley where it kind of seems like a human wrote it, but you are like, is there something wrong with this? But you can't put your finger on what's wrong with it. It's weird, and it almost like lacks depth or something. So I'm not worried about the creativity side, and I think we're going to go through a small twist here where everyone's like, oh, we don't need creatives, we don't need marketing people, we don't need this, and then they're going to go, oh wait, no, we do. The value they bring in this is really important, and it would be like just hiring a bunch of interns out of university. You can do that, and you can get results from them. You get way better results when you've got someone with great levels of expertise and experience guiding these interns to do what's better. That's where I see it going. I think some companies will fire some people, they'll regret it, or they'll not, and they'll be happy with the mediocre creative results they're getting. So I actually think creativity is quite safe. I don't think we're all going to be watching Netflix shows that were created by ChatGPT, because we'll know. And people are really into people, particularly in creativity. So that we like to know who's made them. We like to think, oh, that's similar to this other show I watched because it's got the same people or the same producers or whatever in it. So I think creativity is reasonably safe. I also think coding's reasonably safe. We keep saying that GitHub Copilot means that people aren't going to write code anymore. But again, I think it's going to change to being like maybe the role of a developer is actually writing code faster and getting to focus on other things, and it's just going to free people up. I'm quite skeptical.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
I mean, so coding is definitely where we are. So everyone here uses Copilot, and we see it as a productivity improver, but it's not like the 5x thing that it was promising to be. There's been a new publicity release of Devin recently. Did you see that? And it promises to be amazing, but actually I'm highly skeptical that anytime soon it's going to be replacing coders in their entirety. Yeah, it's interesting what you say about creativity, because I think you're right that there's a part of the process that will be reserved for humans for a long time, the relevance part and the sort of ensuring that things really resonate well and kind of fit with your goals and people's expectations and all that sort of side of things. But I think there's a big chunk of the process that kind of seems to be increasingly taken over. So be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting now. And the bits that are being taken over, maybe we should focus on them being the bits people don't like. So like content creation, it's really boring to upload things to YouTube and to add titles and to add subtitles. That seems like something that could be quite automated and done. Yeah, I guess just at Top of Humans, we really focus on these being tools, like both data and AI being tools to help humans do their jobs better, rather than replacing humans, because that's not what's useful. So replacing bits of jobs, not entire jobs, helping people do their jobs better. And also, I guess with ChatGPT, it's the saying garbage in, garbage out. So being good at writing prompts and giving it good data and using it well is what helps it be good. So maybe you're seeing it be wonderful at creativity because you're an expert prompt engineer.
Yeah.
And maybe that's...
Well, maybe. I'm not saying that of me personally, but one could be, yeah.
So actually training on how to use it and how to talk to it and how to do things is actually the bit that I would focus on at the minute, because that's the bit that's really important and that's where we see the most value. So thinking about where this can be used in your job and then researching some methods on how to use it is probably the best way that we can use it and keep the human side.
Yeah, I think I completely agree that it's definitely kind of a tool at the moment, and that's kind of how we should look at it. And there's a lot to learn to using a new tool, and they are all new tools. So, and the tools are evolving. Thank you so much for joining me today, Laura. It's been a fascinating conversation. I'm sure lots of people will have enjoyed listening to it. And best of luck with Taught by Humans. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing tool. It's going to take the world by storm, and I'm going to watch on with a lot of enthusiasm.